If you're preparing for certification for Microsoft Certified Azure Data Scientist Associate, deep certification number DP-100, then in this video, I'm going to cover everything that you need to learn or understand to get an idea about what this certification is about, what all topics or four main domains you should be learning, where you need to learn, what are the reference links that you will need in order to prepare for this certification, anything and everything that you need to know in order to prepare for this certification and clear this certification, I'll be covering in this video. Hi, if you're new to this channel, my name is Atul and I have close to 2.5 decades of IT experience and last probably more than a decade now in cloud, multi-cloud, and last 3-4 years have been all about AI, machine learning, generative AI that you're doing. Now, the video is coming from after teaching and training more than 44,000 individuals like you to get certified and help you in getting a job. So whatever I'm going to cover is tried and tested, been not only just on me, but hundreds and thousands of our students who are part of this program as well. And now this video has been taken from our program, which is Microsoft Azure AI, Machine Learning and Data Scientist job-oriented program. So you might hear some references about this certification or the program links. Please ignore them, skip them. But the document which I'll be referring in this video, you will get below this under the comment section below this video where you're watching this with all the document reference and the entire document. You can use that. Below this document video, you will inside the document video also have links that will help you to everything that I'm going to talk about, including Microsoft content and material that will come handy for you preparing for this document. So take it all and let's play that video about everything that you need to know about Microsoft Certified Azure Data Scientist DP-100 certification. Hey there, this is Atul from team K21Academy, and in this video I'm going to talk everything about Microsoft Certified Azure Data Scientist Associate certification, that's DP-100. Everything that you must know in order to first understand where does this certification falls in the entire Azure certification categories. What are the learning path you should be doing? Is there any prerequisite or you can directly go for DP-203? What are the exam topics or the main 4 categories and exam weightage, percentage-wise weightage onto these? And what are some of the things that you should be learning and understanding? And while I'm talking about everything about this certification, I'll give you some background in terms of some of the concepts that you should be learning and understanding, and each of these things that you probably need to learn and understand. And you'll learn a ton of things if you're new to AI, machine learning, data science, or especially Azure Data Scientist certification, which is DP-100. You'll learn a ton of this. So there's a lot of information coming from here. I'll be also covering some of the question answers or the commonly asked questions in order to understand the certification. This is all it's coming. Let me just show you. We'll also look at some of the the practice test, where you can get a hold of these practice tests, the sample exam questions, and also look at some of the commonly asked questions, which is non-technical questions. And then if time permits, otherwise we'll take these technical questions inside the program that you see, and we'll look at the module-wise agenda, probably not going. But at the bottom of this, I'll also cover the references, both references from K21Academy portal that's available, or references that are available for Microsoft, including study guide, as well as the 4-part exam readiness that I've used in order to prepare this. So me and my team have spent a lot of time into this on understanding this, but this will give you good clarity on that. So with that, let's first begin with where does this entire certification fall into this category, or so let me make it a slightly bigger, this that you see. So this is a learning path. Let me move myself here and let me make it slightly smaller on this here. So this is the entire path, and this is more from a Azure infrastructure that you see on the left hand side. There you have Azure administrator, developer, security, which are respectively AZ-104, 204 and 500. Then you have expert level, which is 305, and 500, which is 400, which is solution architect, as well as AZ-400, which is Azure DevOps. And then you have Azure fundamental. These are infrastructure related the certifications. On the right hand side, you see the AI 900, DP-100, AI 102. These are AI and machine learning related certifications. And the one you see in the center, these are more on a data related certifications like data fundamental, DP-203, which is data engineer, PL300, which is your data analytics, and DP-300, which is your database, Azure SQL database engineer. So we are talking about DP-100, which is AI under below AI 900, which is DP-100, which is data scientist. This is a 2-star certification. Now this dotted line represents you can go directly on to DP-100, and if you're coming into the program, my suggestion and recommendation would be go directly with the DP-100. The reason being is people spend lots and lots of time on AI 900, or they spend a lot of time into DP-900. These are not prerequisite. They'll help you, but if you go directly with the DP-100, everything that you need to learn and understand with respect to AI 900 and what are the data fundamentally you need to understand you'll be able to understand them easily and quickly here. So that's why directly you can go directly with DP-100. That's what we are going to cover as well as a part of this directly DP-100. Now, in terms of certifications, AI fundamental is totally optional, which is AI 900. My session to you would be directly go for design and implement a data science solution on Microsoft Azure Cloud, which is DP-100. Then you write one exam, and then you probably will be good. And I'll cover what are the basic questions, how many exams, how many questions, all those things we'll do cover. But first, let me explain you the structure, exam structure. So this whole data science certification is covered or broadly categorized into 4 domains. First is about, and these domains are based on how a data engineering process works. So first, most important is you are designing and preparing a machine learning solution, which means you need to find out what is the end game, what is a requirement, and then how do you design and prepare this machine learning solutions that you need. That's why it is around 20 to 25%. And this is probably the second highest among the requirement that, or the domain wise, similar to what preparing the model, which is machine learning model for deployment. That's number 1, which you see here. Then the second part is about exploring data and training model, which is where everything on machine learning model is driven by the data. So how do you bring the data? How do you explore the data and then bring the data? And then how do you train a model, which is machine learning model? That's the maximum weightage, which is 35 to 40%. Then you prepare model for deployment. And in deployment, you have infrastructure to prepare on cloud, Azure cloud, and then you deploy that, prepare the environments to deploy these machine learning model, both model as well as the underlying infrastructure. That's 20-25%, similar to what you see in domain 1. And then domain 4 is all about deploying and retaining the model, which is retraining the model. And deployment, how do you deploy them? There are multiple ways. And then retrain, which means as the data change or things change or drift happens, how do you retrain the model, which is 10 to 15%. And this under 4th port is where you also come something called machine learning operations, MLOps, if you might have heard of DevOps, something similar. So in a nutshell, if you see the whole process of Azure machine learning is you prepare the data, and then you build the model using your favorite tool. It could be Jupyter Notebook, it could be R if you're using R, it could be Visual Studio Code, and inside the program we'll be using extensively Visual Studio Code for you. Then you manage the compute, which is nothing but your memory and CPU underlying infrastructure on which you deploy the model. It could be virtual machine, it could be GPUs, it could be the Kubernetes cluster, it could be something else on-premise infrastructure. That's something you need to do. Then this is where you do training and experiment of the model, and then you register this model inside the model registry and then manage this model as well. And then finally ready to deploy the model, and then the whole cycle goes. You have to re-evaluate, retrain the data as well. So that's the whole flow of machine learning model. Now, same thing in a different model or different diagram, which is you prepare the data, and that's where you do data ingestion, and that's where you use tools like Azure Data Factory to bring the data. Data could be structured, unstructured, semi-structured, coming from a like basically static data. It could be batch data, it could be stream data, and then bringing it through Azure Data Factory or Synapse or any other stream tools that you have. And then once data is done, and then there's something called as EDA, exploratory data analysis. You do the data analysis, and then once data is ready by your data engineers, or you working as a data scientist, your developers, or you as a developer, or whosoever is writing the machine learning model, you build the model using some of these tools. Then you train the model, and then you register the model, and you deploy the model on, this is a representation of Kubernetes cluster or Azure container instance that you're deploying. And then finally, you monitor that using monitoring services as well. So that's basically the first topic, is about design and preparing this machine learning model 20 to 25%. Now, I'm not going to go on detail here, but very high level, quick recap. You define the problem. This is very, very important. A lot of guys even don't know what kind of a problem to or what kind of a problem they're working. So very important, so that once the model is ready and once you're using it, you can see whether it was successful or not. The project of machine learning was successful or not. So you decide what the model should predict when it's successful. Then you get the data, prepare the data, train the model, integrate the model, and monitor the model. Again, I keep repeating this thing. Just want to reiterate this. This is the whole flow that you'll be seeing. Again, inside the program, we're going to go deeper into each of these artifacts that you see. Now, in order for that, that's one phase. And again, of all these bullets which I'm talking about, understanding the requirement of designing an effective machine learning solution on Azure. The second topic is about choosing the machine learning algorithms and methodologies based on their business need as well as data characteristics. And when I say data characteristics, I mean by is what kind of a data it is, structured data, unstructured data, semi-structured data, and then how frequently. There are 5 V's of the data. Again, all these things are covered inside the data fundamental. And if you don't know, as a part of this program, you'll also get the data fundamentals, if I'm not wrong. So you can go on quick links, and in that there'll be on data fundamentals that you probably might be seeing on one of these here. So you'll getting that. Data for absolute beginners. This is where we'll be covering the machine basic, what do you call, the data fundamentals, basics of data engineering. And this is where you have, this was talking about data properties. This was talking about 5 V's of data properties that you see. So based on that, you'll be picking up the machine learning algorithms. And also that's basically, there are supervised learning, unsupervised learning, semi-supervised learning, and reinforcement learning. And within that, you have the algorithm. So depending on what learning you want, depending on the type of requirement and data, you pick up one of these. Again, inside the program, we'll cover all these basic concepts and these methodologies as well as the algorithms. You'll understand what each of these means. Now, so this is another representation. This is when you're designing the machine learning and training model, this is what you'll be learning on a high level. What are the machine learning tasks, identifying that. Then you're choosing the service to train the model, and then services will depend on the requirement. You have Azure Machine Learning. You can also deploy it on Azure Databricks. You can use Azure Azure Synapse Analytics, Azure Cognitive Services, and this diagram that's coming from Microsoft itself. Now, in order to deploy that machine learning model, you can use various compute options like CPU or GPU. You can also use the general purpose memory optimized machines, virtual machines, or you can do it on a Spark cluster on Microsoft Azure Cloud. And all these compute target will depend on the requirements that you want. So do you want automated ML? There is something concept of automated ML which you're going to cover. Or do you want to build using machine learning pipelines? Or you want to use machine learning designer? Which tool, what exactly you're using to build, how comfortable you are, your team is, depending on building these machine learning models. Now, these are various options that may or may not be available. And if you want to do machine learning pipeline, use this ML pipelines, training target. If you use machine learning pipelines, use any of these things and so on. So with that, again, as I said, you have, these are the various tools available on Microsoft Azure Cloud. So make sure that for certification, you prepare what is automated ML. You also understand what is designer, what is notebooks, which are Jupyter notebooks. We'll cover that. Or you can also use simple scripts as well. Now, when you're deploying the model, you have 2 options depending on, you can have a batch inference. And inference is once the model is deployed, how are you going to consume that? Or you do it in a batch method, or you're going to do on a real-time, you send a request and you get a response back. So this is how the model will make predictions ultimately. So consider these as well. Now, from a data ingestion point of view, you should also, now within this requirement, you have another requirement which is about also the data ingestion. So this is, we are still in module domain 1, and another requirement is planning for data ingestion. Data ingestion is the way data coming from different sources. How do you process the data? How do you store the data for machine learning? And so for that, you have data might be coming from different sources like websites, IoT devices. It might be stored in databases. It might be in ERP systems, third-party integrations. It could be, as I said, business systems, which could be ERP, CRMs, or it could be paper document. So you have to decide, and this is where your data engineers will come into picture, or you as a data scientist, you as a data engineer, you as someone who's preparing this needs to decide on what data you want to collect, where to collect it from, how much to collect, what the frequency is going to be. And then you have different data collection methods. And based on that, then you put into data repository. It could be NoSQL, it could be SQL, it could be data warehouse, it could be data lake house, and so on. And then these are some of the things that you'll be doing in these as a part of this data ingestion service that you do. So make yourself familiar for the certification or for knowledge, because these are the kind of things will be asked in the interviews. So this is another screenshot where you have a data coming from, depending on what kind of a data. You might be using Azure Synapse for bringing the data. You might be storing them into blob storage service, which is another service you should be knowing. And then you use machine learning, which is diagram for machine learning as well. Now, as a part of this, as domain 1, you also should be familiar with managing a Azure machine learning workspace. So what is a machine learning workspace? Azure machine learning, this is where you're still on a high level understanding of that particular domain 1, because you'll be using machine learning workspace quite often. So machine learning workspace, think of it as an area which includes your compute on which machine learning model runs. It also runs notebooks, Jupyter Notebook, through which you have all the code which is running on these models. You can have machine learning pipelines, which is a set of instructions, one after another, for end-to-end implementation of that machine learning model. It also includes data on which the machine learning model will be training on, experiments, models, all those things inside is a workspace. And that workspace integrate with maybe storage account for storing the data. It could be for application insight for monitoring and management of that entire application. Key vault for your key security services, key vault for storing services, and then container registry to store if you're deploying these on container instances or Kubernetes clusters, then repository or registry for that. And all this bundled inside a resource group, which is a collection of, if you're familiar with Azure, if not, resource group you should be familiar with. And that, for billing purpose, you have a subscription inside the Azure account. So you should be making sure that you know how to set up and configure Azure machine learning workspace, also including and creating and managing these resources on that. So that's pretty much on you again still domain 1. Now this is another example of you have a workspace, and that workspace is using data stores. Again, another thing you should be doing, which probably will be covering in next more domain, which is data stores and then compute targets on which it's going to run. Data store is for bringing the data from. Its big workspace is connected to the data store, and it's also connected to the compute for managing or deploying these resources. Then these are the top level services like storage account, container registry, key vaults, and application insight, I said. And this workspace will be using environments. Very, very important. Big key top point you should be learning and familiar with environments, which are these machine learning environments. Think of them as a dev test prod UAT environments. You're using experiments. You have a machine learning pipelines, data sets, models, and endpoints. So these are the assets that become part of workspace. So, and then in order to deploy these machine learning model, you can have a compute instance or you can have a compute clusters. We'll look into that, what those things are. So as a part of the domain 1, you're still doing configuring workspace settings, security, networking, access control, to make sure that you have a secure and compliant environment on which your data scientists or machine learning models can be tested and deployed. Also, you should be familiar with monitoring workspaces, using them, and managing the cost by quotas and setting up quotas and budgets. So in order to manage work, you should be basically familiar with build, manage workspaces. So you know how to create a workspace, how to find and search workspace, and then the uses, how to use them using Studio or Python SDK or command line interface. And then how do you manage and delete, again, those workspaces? You can do it through portal or SDK or CLI. So that's about on workspaces, but then the code or source code will be stored in Git repository. So how do you do that code tracking, cloning the Git repository, familiar with the Git repository for code repository, and control, end-to-end control of the code that you've written apart from the machine learning model that you have. So this is again familiarity with these that you see here. So that's basically in a nutshell that you need to do in this domain here. We're still on as a part of this on the first, again, we're still at a preparation phase and designing and preparation, basic familiarity, and at this point you need to have the basic understanding of this. You should also be having familiarity with data sources, and then within data sources there could be multiple data sources, could be Azure SQL database as I was talking about, and then in your machine learning workspace they interface using data store. So data store is nothing but a pointer to where your data sources are, and then you have a data assets like your or the other assets or data sets through which you connect it again. So you should also be familiar with how to import and manage data sets within Azure Machine Learning Workspace. Also how to use data labeling, preparation of tools to clean and prepare the data models, and then manage these data assets, and including data quality and availability of for this data for experiment. Again, trust me, it's going to be all simple. It sounds, if you're listening this first time, it'll be loud sounding complicated, but inside the program, when you start doing and implementing these things, and these hands-on labs, that's when you will understand and you'll understand these and learn. When you do the labs, step-by-step hands-on lab, creating a machine learning space, and then all the dev tools, that's when you will understand all these models. So don't worry about if you're not right now sounding like too complicated, it'll be easy. Now, this concept of data sets again and data assets. So we can create through the folders. You can have a folder, or you can have a files pointing to Azure file systems, or you can have another one which is machine learning tables to store the data. So that's where you need to be familiar with how to create and manage data assets that you have. Also, if you look at from a managing compute points, we are still going in a high level overview about these things exist, and these things you need to be knowing as a part of this designing and preparing the machine learning solution to have familiarity. Now, you should also be familiar with the managing compute for experimenting, and these are different options you have for deploying. So you can deploy your machine learning either on a local machine, or it could be on an Azure machine learning compute cluster. There's a cluster we'll be creating later in the lab, or all of these things you can even use Azure Databricks or Azure Spark Pool, or a remote VM sitting somewhere else, or Azure machine learning, Azure ML Kubernetes cluster. And depending on where your deployed target is, you can or cannot use some of the services. For example, as your automated machine learning, if you want to use AutoML, then our only options are these. And within that also, if you're using Apache Spark, you only an SDK local mode. What that local mode is, we'll cover and understand, but you should be familiar with these. Similarly, if you're using Azure Machine Learning Designer, you can deploy them using Designer only on the first 4 of options. Whereas if you're using machine learning pipelines, you can do it anywhere you want, because pipeline has much more flexibility for you. Also, you should be familiar with provisioning and managing the compute resource. So these are the compute resources. So main, from a certification point of view, it's VM or GPU, or for automated machine learning compute, and then containers and Kubernetes. Now again, if you're new to containers Kubernetes, we'll be covering a bonus class about here that you see about containers and Kubernetes again, so that you understand. Under the quick link, there'll be a link about containers and Kubernetes that you see for beginners to understand this concept. Now, as I said earlier, environments is very, very important. So make sure that you have environment and familiarity with environments. This is, I'm talking about machine learning environment. So there are 3 types of environments for machine learning environments in Microsoft Azure Cloud. You have curated environments, you have a user managed environments, and you have a system managed environments. So make sure you yourself also familiar with how to register environment, how to get environment from a workspace to use in training and deployment model. How do you create a new instance by editing an existing environment, or view changes, or build Docker or Docker images on this from these environments. And these 3 types, what are the differences, which one to use, when to use, make sure yourself familiar with this, and then creating a compute instance as well. You should also be the exam basically, and maybe I'll share the links, or the document will be there where you're watching this below that. So read more about what these environments are and which one to use where, and all the examples, pros and cons of each of these should be familiar. Now, apart from that, you should be learning how to optimize the compute resources for cost effective, because there are cloud principles, and basically the pillars are best practices and pillars. So cost effective and performance is another one of them, 2 of them basically. The security is another as well. So you optimize your compute for cost, for performance, for security, and so on. And then you can scale these resources. You should know how to scale these compute resources based on complexity of the experiment as well as your workload requirement. And that's pretty much on domain one. So don't feel overwhelmed. This is again, once you understand these things, you'll understand when you go through and perform the hands-on lab, things will become much more clear to you. Now, next is about exploring the data and training the model. So this is all about data. Some of the things you have understood. So you should be basically exploring the data by using data assets and data store. I've covered in the module one, basic understanding of this, but this is where you'll be collecting your or connecting your Azure machine learning to various data sources like Azure Data Lake, ADLS Generation 2, or SQL databases or blob storage. And if you're not familiar with that, don't worry, we're going to cover, you should be able to perform some of these things, so data lake and so on. Now, if you are a data analyst, or if not, you should be having a basic familiarity with EDA, which is exploratory data analysis, EDA, to understand the data distribution, correlations, as well as any processing potential or required pre-processing steps that are required. So these are the 6-step framework that you'll be learning as well for EDA part. Now you also, in this model, or in this domain, sorry, you'll be also creating a model, and there are different ways to create a model, but we'll use low code, no code, which is using machine learning designer. You'll be learning how to create that machine learning designer. Now, with that, you should be also familiar with how to use this machine learning designer to visually create and train machine learning model without writing any code. And if you're not a developer, this will come handy. And this is quite common these days. A lot of data scientists don't know how to write a code, but then drag and drop will be helpful. Also, how to integrate different modules to pre-process data, train the model, evaluate the performance within a designer, this interface as well. So that's one thing you should be familiar with. You should also be familiar with automated ML, which is as auto ML we call, to explore what is the optimal models that are available. Now, auto ML is a feature which basically a lot of things are done, and heavy lifting is done by Microsoft. So auto ML is also process of automating the time consuming as well as iterative task of machine learning model deployment. So that basically give you recommendation on that. So this is on a high level. Again, we're going to go deeper into the program. Then that's when you will learn and understand. So things like user inputs, based on that, it'll give you a couple of iterations and it'll automatically select the best one out of this. So it'll do the ranking and say if you the 96, 95%, it'll pick up automatically using AutoML to say this is the best model we should be picking up as well. So you should be understanding, have a familiarity and understanding how to use the AutoML to automatically search for the best model for hyperparameters for a given data set. Now, hyperparameters are important. You should be knowing what is hyperparameters are. And hyperparameters are nothing but settings that are not learned from the data during the process. They're typically set before the training begins and can have a significant impact on the performance of a machine learning model. So make yourself familiar with hyperparameters that are available. Also, you're interpreting and selecting the best model as well. So that's another one. Next one is you should also be familiar with using Azure notebooks, Jupyter notebooks or notebook for custom model training. And that is where Jupyter notebooks comes into picture. So Jupyter notebooks are nothing but an interactive coding environment where you write the code and execute, and then step by step visualize the result at each step. Now, inside the program, inside this, you'll have some labs around so you can understand how the data Jupyter notebook plays. Now, you should also implement custom processing model and evaluate scripts in Python or R. You can use Python or R. Now, Python is much more common, and in fact, we're going to cover all these things inside the Python, but you can use R as well. Now, again, if you're not familiar with Python, we have given you as a bonus about Python for data engineers and data scientists. So both data scientists and data engineers, you'll be understanding and performing these labs, so you understand the Python as well. And we'll cover everything right from introduction to Python to object and database data structure basics to including to things like Python statements, methods, loops, object-oriented programming, error handling, and Python decorators. And then we are using frameworks like NumPy, Panda, and these Plotly and other things as well. So coming back to, without being too much going away, you should also be familiar with tuning these hyperparameters talking about. Now there you have grid search, you have a random search, and Bayesian optimism. So make sure you understand these concepts inside the program. Of course, we are going to cover, and but familiarity with the differences between these what are these. So you have understand what is grid search, how does it work. Similarly, what is random search, how does it work. Read the comments, but again, inside the program, we're going to go deeper into these things. What is this Bayesian optimization means, pros and cons of these, and which one you should be picking these, which parameters. To these are different techniques, which one to pick for the best hyperparameter settings that you do. And that's basically the domain 2, which is the main crux of that. That's where you'll be actually doing a lot of these training and deployment of models. Then domain number 3 is about preparing the model for deployment. So this is where you have, if you're ops guy who is basically deploying them, that's where you begin to prepare that model. That's around 20 to 25%. And this is where you're going to running these model scripts. So you're executing the scripts either locally or in a cloud-based compute instance. Most of the labs we are going to do on compute cloud as well. So how do you manage scripts, dependencies, environment variables, logging, and logging of the execution of that machine learning. So this is a whole flow of this whole deployment process. So make sure you become yourself familiar with this. Also, how do you prepare training pipelines? These are machine learning pipelines, as well as end-to-end basically model training, right from data ingestion to pre-processing to model training to evaluation in a single pipeline for repeatability and also for scalability. Also, then you need to know how to manage machine learning model, and for management you have monitoring and logging. You should also be knowing how to register these machine learning models, taking it and storing them to model registry. So think of it as if you're coming from a containerized containers and Kubernetes, you have container images like that. You have machine learning image repository models, basically machine learning models. You store them into model registry and then use them in automated manner using DevOps, or now called as MLOps. Also evaluating and comparing the performance of the model based on the different, you have multiple models based on or training output, and you pick up the best one as well. Also, basically all these things, all the artifacts associated with that, how do you manage them? That's domain number 3. And then domain number 4, which is fourth and final one, which is deploying and retaining the model. That's around 10 to 15%. And this is where you're going to create a containerized environments, Azure Container Instance ACIs, or Azure Kubernetes service as well. So how do you deploy machine learning model as either as a web service, which is a getting a response immediately, or as a batch service, and in Azure using Azure managed endpoints or in a containerized environment. Now, you should also be doing how to configure scaling, monitoring, security to all these production quality machine learning. And that is where you have the different configurations. Like this is at the time of deployment, you'll be understanding these things like endpoints, name of the deployment, environment, code configuration, instance type, and then how many instances that you want to configure. Maybe you can say start with this and can grow these many environments instances as well. Also, you should know how to test the deployment, and then for testing you can have Azure DevOps pipelines, or you can have a GitHub or other method of triggering these machine learning models on automated or manually as well. So, and then finally, important is how do you apply the machine learning operations, MLOps practices, monitoring, build, train, entire CI/CD as well. So you should be familiar with what is CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment part. So how do you implement that in a machine learning operations MLOps concepts? Again, inside the program, we're going to go deeper into from a machine learning operations with respect to Azure, but we're going to also go in generic MLOps that we're going to go as a bonus class. So this is about logical architecture of MLOps and then you also will be learning and understanding system architecture. Make yourself familiar with MLOps. MLOps alone can help you with lots and lots of jobs. So we're going to cover, or you'll be learning. Make yourself familiar with these both the architecture of MLOps as well. So end-to-end pipeline. And I'll give you from a system architecture point of view. For example, you have the runtime environment for self-hosted. These are Azure DevOps pipelines, and you might have for data store different storage. You have Azure Data Factory, which is bringing the data from different data sources and storing into Azure Azure Data Lake, ADLS, or blob storage. Then this is where you're using Azure DevOps, which is your DevOps pipelines for CI/CD. And this is where you have Azure Machine Learning Workspace hooking in your Azure DevOps pipelines. CI/CD pipeline is basically configured on this. So you have a delivery, but you also have CI, which is integration, where you build the code that written by developers into an image and so on. And then finally, you also have observability as a part of this whole MLOps, where that is where you have monitoring management. As you use services like Azure Monitor, application insights, log analytics, and then you can deliver these reports on a dashboard using tools like Power BI. So make sure you're familiar with automating CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment using either Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions on as well. This is a whole flow. Because of the time, I'm not going to cover that. But inside MLOps module, you'll look and go deeper into these things. So you have a DevOps build pipeline, and this is where your developers will be building the machine learning model and storing them into a model registry, and where you train, evaluate, register the model, and that's your build pipeline. And then using deployment pipeline or a release pipeline, which we call CD, deployment or release pipeline, you'll be building an environment automatically through maybe a Terraform or through ARM template or Azure Biceps, and you create the underlying infrastructure, maybe Azure Container Instance or Kubernetes cluster to deploy these machine learning models. You create an environments, you create a staging, dev, test, prod, and so on. And then you deploy these models. You will be integrating and using the underlying compute, could be Kubernetes cluster and so on. And then the whole process goes and store the data. So that CI/CD will make sure you're familiar. And then final thing is about, not final, but second last thing is you to configure monitoring, alerting for model drifts, performance degradation, or any data quality issues to make sure that your ongoing sequences are configured properly. So this is where you'll be So this is where you'll be using Azure Monitor service, and that is where you have the data coming, everything from monitoring, log, metrics, traces, changes, all those things. And then so hook in with the Azure Monitor and then display reports as well. So that's pretty much in terms of monitoring, alerting for model drift, performance degradation, as well as data quality issues. That's basically domain 4. So that's pretty much all the 4 domains that you see. In order just to do a quick recap on these models or the topics that you do domain, you have design and prepare the machine learning model, which is 20 to 25%. Data and training model 35 to 40%. Preparing a model for deployment is 20 to 25%. And then deploying a training model is 10 to 15%. Now, on top of that, we are giving you make sure that you practice once you so the first and most important is you should be going through all the theory part, lab part, step-by-step hands-on lab, so you understand all these concepts very, very good. And once you understand, then go and prepare for these exam questions. And there are multiple exam questions. The link will be here on this here. So at the time of recording, we have a 5 exam set questions, and then we constantly improve and update based on the feedback that we are getting. So you can click on each of these links here, and then you can read these documents that probably on each of these documents, there'll be explanation. So each of these will have an explanation on the answers, what is the right answer and why that particular answer is right or wrong. I'm not going to go it right now here. We'll have a separate video which I'll go talk about, and we'll be taking up these question answers that you see here on as well. Now, with that, let's look at some of the commonly asked questions that you can that probably a lot of guys might have, and I'm going to pick them one by one. And some of these questions, if you already know, you can fast forward or can pause or go slow depending on some of the basic questions you might have related to this data scientist certification. So the first question is about what is DP-100 certification. I'm not going to cover that because we have covered for last 30 minutes or so. We have covered this, but let's look at how long does it take to give exam and what is the cost. Now, time it takes, usually the actual time is around 2 hours to complete, but there might be some extra time depending on to setting up your machine and all those things, instructions, signing into the account and so on. And the cost for this is $165. We'll check the exam link, follow this link on, go and look at the link on registering, that will have much more information, and the price might vary slightly depending on which country you're coming from, but usually $165. And trust me, it's totally worth to have being so called as Microsoft certified, the data scientist, or DP-100 certified as well. So depending on the time, as I said, the actual preparation time will totally depend on you, how much time you go on an hourly basis or daily basis, and also how many time my session to you would be do the certification. Once you have the good knowledge, understand, do the hands-on lab, and then only you apply for this exam. But 2 hours is the actual, slightly more, slightly less, depending on how well you're prepared for this. Now, how many questions that contains? It's around 40 to 60 questions. And the questions will be multiple choice questions or drag and drop, case studies, and few other format, fill in the blank, and so on. And the questions, each question might, an exact number might differ between 40 to 60, but usually you get that many questions in that. There's no negative marking. Oh, another thing is what kind of a help you can get. You only get the Microsoft official document, so you can refer to the Microsoft official document. You won't have access to Google or any other browser. It's open book, but as long as you're doing through Microsoft Learn document. Having said that, you might think, oh, I have a Microsoft Learn, I can pick that from there. My suggestion to you would be prepare very well about for this exam. Make sure very important. Now, can we open another browser during the exam? Answer is no, you can't. You only Microsoft Learn will be allowed for as well. Now, is someone going to watch you while giving the exam? Now, there are two ways you can give exam. You can go to the exam center, and what all those things centers are. If you go to this page, again, we'll refer to this link on this. So registration, all those things and preparation are inside this. But scheduling exam, this is where I was talking about scheduling exam. These are languages and how you practice. When you schedule, you select, you're going to the center, or you can go give this exam even from home as well. Again, inside, once we come to the exam giving module, inside the certification module, we'll go deeper into. I'm going to give you the entire instructions separately as well. But you can give this exam even from home. You should have a camera on. You should have the desk clean and lock yourself into. And the camera will always be looking at remotely for you. And you have to test your the laptop or setup on site this as well. Now, another question is that. Is there a negative marking? There's no negative marking. So my suggestion to you would be try out, even if you give it wrong, try that out. If you don't know the answer, there's no negative marking. In order to pass, there are 1,000 answers. The scale will be the exam scoring will be between 1 to 1,000, and you should have minimum 700 score, 700 plus as well. Now, do I need to repay? Oh, if I fail the exam, if you follow what we are asking you to do, which is about if you follow all the hands-on labs, theory part, and go through these set of exam questions, there is no reason why you should fail. Just in case, in a worst case, you're very unlucky, then you can take the exam, but you need to give yourself a 24 hours break, and then you can register, but you have to full amount again on that. So there's no discount for retaking the exam as well. So that's pretty much. If you have any further question, leave them under the anything else comes to inside that as well. Now, this is inside the program. You will see all these things. I'm not going to repeat it, but refer to these some document links which are useful for you to build, which is about everything about this certification exam. Whatever I'm going to cover this video, I'm going to place this here as well. So which is K21Academy.com for DP-100, and then 11 is the number which we keep all for the certification. So DP-100 and then 11. All the hands-on lab that you should be preparing, you should be going to K21Academy.com DP-100 again, and then 05, number 05 for the hands-on lab. Again, all these hands-on labs are here inside this, and we'll be constantly updating that you'll be seeing. No, oh yeah, not this one. This is Python. I think this is this one's. So you have all these hands-on lab that you see here. Also, everything about this exam, which I've mentioned, some of the things I picked up from this, which I've already shown you. Maybe just refer to this page, which I earlier mentioned to you. This has everything that you need to know about this exam. Also, there are 4 exam readiness zones. I think it's good. It's not enough in my view, but worth looking at all the 4 points. Some of these things that you see I've picked up from here, but I've all done a lot of research. My team have given me a lot of content to prepare. But this is on a high level that you should be doing, and we'll be learning. And again, go and I'm going to put this under this or this video here. We'll have this video as well. Also, anything about live schedule, all those things will be visible here as well, and we'll be doing all these hands-on labs as well. So that's pretty much about it. I was hoping to finish it in 30 minutes, but it extended. I wanted to give as much value as I could on this in the shortest possible time without cutting corners and giving you the good idea. Again, this is a 40,000 view on a bird's eye view of everything that you will be learning or should be learning in order to prepare for this certification. Any doubts, leave them in the comment section. Don't feel overwhelmed. Trust me, if you follow what I'm going to tell you, you'll learn all this in a very simple, easy manner. If you have any questions, and also give me the feedback on, did you enjoy this video? What we could do to improve that? Is it good enough? Is it too short? Is it too long? Am I speaking fast? Am I going slow? Does it have enough? Again, rate it based on this is a first video in terms of giving you a full overview, and I'm going to go deeper into one by one, step by step. Don't feel overwhelmed. Don't feel stressed. Trust me, it's going to be very, very simple and easy. With that, this is Atul from Team K21Academy. Maybe we want to play it one more time, maybe look at these links, and then focus on the first lab about preparing for data science or Azure Machine Learning Studio. We'll be having tons and tons of fun as well. With that, this is Atul for Team K21Academy. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching this. Take care and bye for now.